A Werewolf Shifter romance audiobook written by Jane. Prologue. The scent of blood, hot and metallic, clung to the air like a shroud. It mingled with the acrid stench of burning pine and the terrifying, unfamiliar tang of pure despair. My tiny body, no bigger than a pup's, trembled uncontrollably, buried deep beneath the shattered remains of what was once our family's hidden sanctuary. Just moments ago, laughter had filled these woods, my mother's gentle hum, my father's quiet strength. Now, only screams echoed in the silence, followed by the chilling thump, thump, thump of heavy boots. I didn't know what scared me more, the monsters outside or the terrifying silence from where my parents had been. It had happened so fast, too fast. One moment I was nestled safely in my mother's arms, listening to the ancient lullabies of our lineage, stories of Lycan Luna and their boundless magic. The next, the world exploded. Fire. Roars. And then, the searing, unimaginable pain as a dark, twisted power ripped through our sacred wards, tearing everything apart. My parents, fierce and powerful, had fought. Oh, how they fought. But the sheer number of our attackers, their eyes burning with a cruel, possessive hunger, was too much. "Run, Elara! Hide! Forget!" My mother's last words, a guttural command ripped from her soul, had seared themselves into my consciousness. Forget who I was. Forget what I was. And so, I ran. A mere child, no more than 5 winters old, I clawed my way through the wreckage, the acrid smoke burning my lungs, the screams of my pack, my family, dying out behind me. I remembered their faces, their fear, and the chilling realization that they were hunted. Not just by rogue packs, but by those who sought to harness the rare power of the Lycan Luna lineage for themselves. My ancestors, who had walked this earth for centuries protecting the balance, had been brought to their knees. This wasn't just a raid, it was an eradication. A chilling reminder that power, left exposed, invited only destruction. For years, that day haunted my nightmares, a silent film of fire and blood. It drove me. It sculpted me. Every decision, every solitary step I took, was designed to keep me hidden, to keep me safe. I became a ghost in the vast, wild lands, mastering the art of invisibility, burying the truth of my forgotten lineage, the dormant Lycan Luna magic, deep within. Because the world was a dangerous place, filled with those who craved power, and my very existence was a magnet for them. My greatest strength, I believed, lay in absolute solitude. I swore I would never expose myself, never trust, never allow myself to be vulnerable enough to be found, because vulnerability was weakness, and weakness led to loss. I had lost everything once. I would not lose again. This silent vow defined my life until the day fate decided to twist my carefully constructed world into something unrecognizable. The scent of damp earth and pine needles filled Elara's lungs, a familiar comfort that usually grounded her. Now, even that seemed muted, a dull backdrop to the strange new vibration deep within. She crouched low, her movements fluid and silent as shadow, observing a deer grazing in the mist-shrouded clearing. Her stomach rumbled, a sharp reminder of why she was out here. Survival. Always survival. Her fingers flexed, tracing the worn leather of her bowstring, a silent prayer of thanks for its reliability. She was a rogue, a lone wolf by choice, because being alone meant being safe. She'd learned that lesson carved into her very soul, a painful scar from a past she refused to revisit. Truth be told, she didn't know what scared her more, facing down a territorial alpha or the chilling thought of ever being vulnerable again. With every heartbeat, the subtle pull persisted, an irritating whisper against the quiet hum of the forest. It was like a new, unwanted string had been tied to her soul, tugging her in an unknown direction. She ignored it, focusing on the rhythmic breathing of her prey, the delicate twitch of its ears. Her life demanded precision, stealth, and a heart as cold as mountain ice. Anything else was a weakness she couldn't afford, because vulnerability led to capture. It led to questions, and questions led to the truth of what she was. A forgotten omega from a forgotten lineage, a secret that could turn her into a target for ancient enemies. Not only that, but it would force her into a destiny she never wanted, tying her to a pack, a family she didn't believe she could ever have or trust. As the wind shifted, carrying the deer's scent closer, Elara tightened her grip, her golden eyes, usually so sharp and unblinking, flickering with a touch of unease. Still, she had to hunt. Her muscles ached from days of constant travel, seeking new, untouched territories where she wouldn't cross paths with established packs. Maybe it was fate, she thought with a bitter twist of her lips, that even here, in the quietest corners of the world, something was trying to find her. The thought sent a shiver down her spine that had nothing to do with the morning chill. She was a ghost, a myth, a whisper in the wind, and she needed to stay that way. The faint pull felt like a hunter's invisible net, tightening with insidious slowness. She needed to lose herself again, deeper into the wilderness. But then, the deer lifted its head, its eyes wide, sensing something Elara hadn't yet. Soon after, a low growl rumbled in the distance, not from the deer, but from something far larger, far more dangerous. It was a pack warning, deep and guttural, signaling trespass. Elara froze, her hunting instincts immediately overridden by her survival protocol. That's why she always stayed moving, always stayed ahead. Because packs meant rules, and rules meant discovery. This particular growl felt too close, too territorial for comfort. She melted back into the shadows, becoming one with the gnarled roots and dense underbrush, her breathing shallow, almost non-existent. The forest, once her sanctuary, now felt like a cage, its trees too sparse, its cover too thin. Meanwhile, the growls intensified, now accompanied by the heavy thud of multiple paws on damp earth. A patrol. So, they were closer than she thought. Elara pressed herself against the cold, rough bark of an ancient oak, her senses straining. She could pick out the scents now, the sharp metallic tang of alpha, the musky scent of beta, and the underlying scent of a pack, tightly knit and powerful. Her throat tightened. She hated this. She hated the vulnerability that came with being hunted, even if they didn't know who they were hunting. She didn't know what scared her more, being caught, or the terrifying thought that the strange pull she felt might be leading her directly to them. This was too much of a coincidence. Was it the universe playing a cruel joke? As a result, her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drum against the silence of the forest. The patrol passed within yards of her hiding spot, their low voices rumbling, discussing trespassers. She recognized the scent. Shadow Moon Pack, renowned for their ferocity and ancient lineage. A shiver, colder than any morning mist, snaked down her spine. These weren't just any wolves. These were alphas. Plural. And their combined scent was unbelievably potent, almost suffocating. With every step they took, the inexplicable pull within Elara intensified, as if pulled by a string. It mirrored their movements, drawing her towards them with an undeniable, terrifying force. Was this the source of the unsettling warmth she'd felt? She felt it, clear as day, a relentless magnetic force, tying her to them. What followed was a dizzying, disorienting flood. The pull, once a persistent tug, suddenly became a searing, undeniable rope, yanking her forward with incredible force. It wasn't one rope, though. No. It was 3 distinct, overwhelming bonds, each leading to a different, equally powerful alpha. The realization slammed into Elara with the force of a physical blow, stealing her breath. Her mind screamed in protest. 3? It was impossible. Unheard of. A mate bond was singular, sacred. What monstrous twist of fate was this? She stumbled, her knees threatening to buckle, the ground feeling unstable beneath her feet. Her carefully constructed world, built brick by painstakingly solitary brick, wasn't just cracking, it was shattering. In that moment, a growl rose in her throat, not of fear, but of pure, primal denial. She didn't want this. She didn't want any of it. Her mind flashed to the ancient enemies, the forgotten prophecies of her lineage, and the hunters who sought to exploit such rare power. To be bound to one alpha was a risk. To three? It was a death sentence. Her breath caught, hitched in her chest. She needed to run, to escape, to disappear. Again. She'd spent her whole life hiding, because her secret could expose her to a world she'd sworn to avoid, and force her into a destiny she never wanted, a destiny that now felt terrifyingly real. Without warning, the trio of alphas, drawn by the same undeniable bond that ravaged Elara, appeared from the tree line, their eyes immediately locking onto her. Kale, stoic and strategic, his gaze piercing. Reese, wild and untamed, his primal energy radiating. And Finn, charming yet deeply possessive, a dangerous glint in his enigmatic eyes. As the silence stretched between them, thick and charged, Elara felt it, clear as day, the burning intensity of their combined gazes pulling her further into their orbit. Her wolf pressed forward, a forgotten instinct rising. Something inside her shifted, a deep, resonant hum answering the primal call of her three mates. Her world tilted, and just like that, everything changed. She was caught, and for the first time in her life, Elara, the fiercely independent rogue, felt utterly, terrifyingly, profoundly bound. The path ahead, she instinctively knew, would be anything but solitary. A jolt of raw primal panic ripped through Elara, sharper than any thorn bush or hungry maw. Her mind, usually a fortress of cold logic, screamed in protest. No, this can't be happening. The three searing pulls, undeniable and distinct, slammed into her. One felt like the unyielding earth itself, another a wild, crackling wildfire, and the third, a smooth, deep ocean current. She knew, with a horrifying certainty, that these were her mates. Her world spun, not just from the dizzying force of the mate bond, but from the crushing weight of her worst nightmare unfolding. She tried to move, to turn and flee, but her limbs felt like lead, heavy and unresponsive. Every instinct shrieked at her to run, to vanish, to sever this impossible connection. This was why she had always lived alone, to avoid exactly this kind of absolute, inescapable surrender. Before she could even manage a single step, shadows detached from the dense forest, coalescing into three imposing figures. Kale, his muscular frame radiating an almost tangible aura of authority, stepped forward first. His eyes, the color of ancient stone, fixed on hers, a silent recognition passing between them. Then came Reese, a whirlwind of untamed power, his golden gaze burning with a fierce, possessive intensity. He let out a low, guttural growl, a sound that should have terrified her, but instead sent a strange shiver of primal awareness through her very core. Finally, Finn, with a charming smile that didn't quite reach his calculating eyes, completed the trio, his presence a smooth, insidious draw that both intrigued and repelled her. In that moment, as their gazes locked, the mate bond roared to life within her, an unbearable symphony of connection that threatened to rip her apart. She tried to fight it, to push back against the invisible tethers, to deny the undeniable heat radiating from their presence. But then Kale's voice, a deep rumble like shifting earth, cut through the clamor of her thoughts. "Ours," he stated, his tone unwavering, unyielding. It wasn't a question. It was a declaration. Panic built within her, cold and sharp. This wasn't just about mating. It was about her freedom, her very existence as she knew it. She thrashed, a desperate, wild thing caught in a snare. But it was useless. Their combined alpha aura was suffocating, overwhelming her senses, stripping away her control. What she'd always feared, being trapped, being exposed, was now her terrifying reality. Elara's vision blurred, the world tilting precariously as the darkness, not of night but of forced acceptance, closed in. Elara awoke to the unfamiliar scent of cedar and aged parchment, not the damp earth she was used to. A soft, woven blanket, far too luxurious for her rogue sensibilities, covered her. Fury, hot and sharp, propelled her upright. She was in a bed, in a room, in a pack house. The realization landed like a punch to her gut. This wasn't some dream. This was very real. Her eyes scanned the elegant but confining room. The window was tall but barred, and the heavy oak door looked utterly impregnable. Her immediate goal was clear: escape. She had to find a way out because staying here meant surrendering every bit of herself she'd fought so hard to preserve. Just as she threw her legs over the side of the bed, the door clicked open. Kale, Reese, and Finn stood framed in the doorway, their combined presence filling the space, their scent a potent, inescapable cloud around her. Reese, with his wild, untamed grin, stepped in first, his gaze raking over her with an almost predatory intensity. "Thought you'd run, little mate?" he challenged, his voice a low purr that grated on her nerves. Her hackles rose. Elara launched herself at him, a blur of untamed fury. But Kale, impossibly fast, was already between them, his hand firm on her shoulder. "Calm yourself," he commanded, his voice deep and authoritative, yet with an underlying current that resonated with her very core. She hated it. She hated how easily he could control her. Finn, meanwhile, glided into the room, his charming smile doing little to soothe the raw edges of her anger. "We understand this is unexpected, Elara," he began, his voice smooth as polished stone. "But the bond does not lie. You are ours." His words, though soft, felt like chains of silk and steel wrapping around her. Her emotional state was a tempest of frustration and bitter helplessness. She wanted to scream, to lash out, to remind them she belonged to no one. Yet, despite that, the inescapable pull of the bond thrummed insistently beneath her rage, a confusing undercurrent of desire. How could she desire what stripped her of everything? The tension in the room was a living thing, thick and suffocating. This struggle, she realized, was only just beginning. The grand hall of the Shadow Moon pack house pulsed with a muted energy, the low murmur of conversations rippling through the ancient stones. Elara stood rigid, flanked by the three Alpha brothers, their powerful bodies a warm, inescapable presence on either side of her. Her skin prickled, every nerve ending screaming under the collective gaze of the pack members. She was on display, a prize, and the humiliation burned like a brand. Her goal was to maintain a semblance of composure, to project strength even as she felt utterly exposed. She would not break, not here, not now. Moments later, the pack elders, their faces etched with centuries of wisdom and tradition, took their places on a raised dais. An old she-wolf, her eyes like chipped obsidian, began to speak of ancient laws and the sanctity of the mate bond. Elara's mind raced, searching for an escape, a loophole, anything. But her options were non-existent. She was trapped, a rogue caught in the elaborate web of pack life and destiny. Reese's fingers, warm and calloused, brushed hers, a possessive gesture that sent a jolt through her, pulling her attention back to the present. He squeezed gently, a silent warning, or perhaps a reassurance she didn't want. What followed was the formal declaration. Kale stepped forward, his voice booming through the silent hall, echoing off the high ceilings. "By the ancient laws, we, the Alpha Triplet brothers of the Shadow Moon Pack, claim Elara as our fated mate." A collective gasp rippled through the gathered wolves. Then, a roar of approval, a primal chorus that resonated in Elara's very bones. Her world tilted again, but this time it felt less like falling and more like being irrevocably pulled into a powerful current. Her immediate new goal was grim: survive, adapt, learn to navigate this impossible reality. Because of that public claim, she was no longer just Elara, the rogue. She was now the mate of three alphas, an unprecedented situation that changed everything, cementing her fate within the formidable Shadow Moon Pack. The morning sun, filtered through the thick ancient glass of her new bedroom window, felt strangely heavy on Elara's skin. It wasn't the free, wild warmth of the open forest she was used to. Instead, it felt like the gilded bars of a luxurious cage. She rose, the silken sheets a stark contrast to the rough earth she usually slept on, and moved to the window. Below, the Shadow Moonpack compound bustled with activity. Wolves trained in the central yard, their roars echoing against the stone walls. Others moved with purpose, managing supplies or tending to the younger pups. The sheer volume of life, of interconnectedness, was overwhelming. Her immediate goal was to observe, to understand the rhythms of this place that was now, impossibly, her home. She watched them, a phantom ache in her chest for the solitude she'd lost. How could so many lives intertwine without tangling beyond repair? Despite that, the mate bond, now a constant hum beneath her skin, pulled her gaze instinctively towards three figures. Kale, imposing even from a distance, directed a training exercise with quiet authority. Reese, a blur of raw power, sparred fiercely with another wolf, his snarls carrying on the wind. And Finn, standing near the packhouse entrance, engaged in hushed, intense conversation with an elder, his gestures smooth and persuasive. Their presences were like three suns, radiating an inescapable warmth that both fascinated and repelled her. Still, she kept her distance, feeling like an alien in their midst. She had to learn their ways, their routines, because knowing them was her only path to navigating this new, unwanted existence. Every glance, every shared breath felt like another link in a chain she hadn't forged. As the morning wore on, Elara found herself drawn into the pack's communal meals, the scent of rich, meaty stews filling the air. She ate sparingly, her eyes constantly assessing, observing the subtle power dynamics within the Alpha trio themselves. They were brothers, yes, but also distinct leaders, each vying for a piece of control even over her. Reese's eyes followed her every move, a primal possessiveness she felt like a brand on her skin. Finn offered charming, seemingly innocuous compliments, his words laced with a subtle manipulation she quickly detected. Kale, however, watched her with a quiet intensity, a calculating gaze that seemed to peel back her layers. Her emotional state was a constant push and pull between resentment at her lost freedom and a confusing, almost magnetic curiosity about them. She needed to adapt or be consumed by their world. The next afternoon, Elara found herself in the sprawling pack library, its shelves crammed with ancient tomes and scrolls. Her fingers traced the faded spines, looking for anything that might shed light on her own forgotten lineage, or this impossible triple bond. She wasn't alone. Finn was there, ostensibly reading, but his attention, she sensed, was entirely on her. He had a way of being present without being intrusive, a silken cord around her defenses. Her immediate goal was to find answers about herself, to understand this sudden, overwhelming destiny forced upon her. She hated needing answers from their world. Finn, eventually, closed his book with a soft thud. "Seeking knowledge, little rogue," he murmured, his voice a warm, inviting tone that grated on her nerves. He moved closer, a predatory grace in his steps. "Perhaps I can assist. Our history is vast, Elara, and your own, I suspect, is far older than you realize." He saw too much, knew too much, and it made her hackles rise. She bristled, her walls instantly snapping back into place. "I seek only to understand my current situation," she retorted, her voice sharper than she intended. She wanted to reject his offer, because accepting help felt like weakness, like an invitation to further entanglement. But then, a flicker of genuine curiosity, a hunger for knowledge she couldn't deny, warred with her ingrained mistrust. Instead of pressing, Finn simply smiled, a knowing glint in his eyes. He pulled out a dusty scroll from a high shelf, its edges crumbling with age. "This speaks of rare bonds, of ancient magic, perhaps of forgotten omegas." His words hit her like a physical blow. Her heart hammered, betrayal burning hot in her veins. How could he know? How could any of them know? She snatched the scroll from him, her fingers trembling. Her emotional state was a whirlwind of shock, fear, and a burning need to conceal her past. This was her first real test in this new reality, a direct challenge to her secrecy. The very thought of her lineage being exposed, her true power revealed, sent a cold dread through her veins. This wasn't just about her anymore. This was about their pack's very existence. The following morning, Elara observed a pack training session, the rhythmic thud of bodies and the sharp scent of exertion filling the air. Kyle oversaw it all, his commands concise and unwavering. Rhys, meanwhile, moved with a raw, untamed grace that drew her eye, a blur of power and instinct. As Elara watched, a younger wolf, eager but inexperienced, made a critical error in a simulated defense exercise. Her immediate goal was simply to observe, to understand their tactics, but her rogue instinct screamed at the inefficiency. She found herself tensing, a low growl rumbling in her chest, almost instinctively. She didn't mean to interfere. But then, the young wolf was about to be taken down by his opponent. Without thinking, Elara called out, her voice cutting through the grunts and snarls. "Shift your weight! Use the rock!" The training stopped cold. Every head, including Kale's and Rhys's, swiveled towards her. The young wolf, startled, looked at her, then to Kale. Her stomach dropped. She had overstepped, broken an unspoken rule. A dangerous blush crept up her neck. Her emotional state was a mortifying mix of embarrassment and indignant certainty that she was right. She'd spent her life relying on her instincts to survive, and now they were a liability. Kale approached, his expression unreadable, his gaze heavy on her. "You have an opinion, rogue?" he challenged, his voice low, a ripple of controlled power. The other trainers and even Rhys watched intently. This was a test, her breath caught. He was vulnerable, she stated, her voice trembling but firm, because he relied on brute force where agility was needed. A true alpha knows when to adapt. Her words, though direct, were surprisingly respectful, a subtle nod to Kale's intelligence. A beat later, Rhys let out a low chuckle, a sound of wild appreciation. Kale studied her for a long moment, then, to her utter surprise, nodded slowly. "Show them," he commanded, his eyes holding hers, a challenging glint that promised much more than just a training demonstration. It was a clear invitation into their world, and she knew with a sudden, sharp clarity that she had just crossed another threshold. The tension in the Alpha's shared quarters crackled like static electricity, thick and suffocating. Elara stood by the large stone fireplace, the warmth doing little to thaw the glacial distance between the three brothers. Her immediate goal was to simply observe, to understand the intricacies of their power dynamic, but her presence seemed to ignite their possessiveness like dry tinder. Rhys paced, his untamed energy barely contained, while Finn leaned against a wall, his charming facade thin, revealing a sharp, calculating edge beneath. Kale, usually the anchor, sat at a heavy oak table, a deep frown etched on his face. He watched the other two with a simmering frustration. "She's our mate," Rhys growled, his voice a low rumble directed at Finn, but his golden eyes flickered to Elara, a possessive fire in their depths. "Not a prize to be won with pretty words, Finn." Finn merely chuckled, a sound devoid of humor. "And you think brute force will sway her, brother? She's a wild thing. She needs persuasion." His gaze, smooth and unsettling, slid to Elara, a silent challenge in its depths. Elara felt a familiar cold weight settle in her chest. This was exactly what she'd feared, being a source of conflict, an object of contention. Her old misbelief, that connection only brought pain and struggle, flared with renewed intensity. Yet, despite that, a strange warmth, a subtle thrum from the mate bond pulsed beneath her skin. It was confusing, this simultaneous repulsion and undeniable draw. Kale finally slammed his fist on the table. "Enough." His voice, though quiet, resonated with undeniable alpha authority, silencing his brothers. "We are united, not divided. She is ours collectively. We will not tear our pack apart over this." His words were a clear plan, a desperate plea for unity. But then, a low, desperate howl ripped through the sudden silence, echoing from outside the pack house walls. It was a cry of profound distress, raw and terrifying, signaling a danger far greater than their internal squabbles. The scent of fear, mixed with something sickly sweet, drifted on the night air. The chilling howl led them to the outskirts of the territory, where a young Omega lay writhing on the damp earth, his fur matted, his eyes wide with delirium. A strange black rash blossomed across his skin, oozing a foul-smelling ichor. The air grew heavy, thick with the sick, sweet scent of decay, even as the cold dread seeped into Elara's bones. This was it, the plague, the very thing the ancient prophecies whispered about, tied to her forgotten lineage. Her heart hammered so loudly she was sure the others could hear it. Her immediate goal was to understand, to somehow fight this horrifying sickness. But deep down, she knew the truth. This was beyond their collective knowledge. Kale and Finn recoiled, their faces etched with shock and primal fear. This was unlike any illness they had encountered. Rhys, however, his untamed warrior instincts overriding caution, knelt beside the dying Omega, his face contorted in a snarl of protective rage. He reached out, his hand shaking, but hesitated to touch. In that moment, a powerful, intuitive surge of energy coursed through Elara. It wasn't a choice. Her body moved on instinct. As if pulled by a string, she dropped to her knees beside Rhys, ignoring the warnings screaming in her mind. Her hand, trembling slightly, settled over Rhys's on the dying Omega's forehead. A raw, burning sensation bloomed beneath her skin, unfamiliar yet ancient, flowing from her into the suffering wolf. It was her dormant Omega magic, responding to the blight, a primal call to a long-forgotten duty. A soft, ethereal glow emanated from her hands, a pale, shimmering light that pulsed faintly. The black rash on the Omega's skin receded, just slightly, the awful scent momentarily fading. It wasn't a cure, not yet, but a tangible, undeniable impact. Rhys gasped, pulling his hand away as if burned, his golden eyes wide with shock and a dawning, reverent awe. He stared at Elara, his wildness momentarily tamed by wonder. His voice trembled. "Elara, what was that?" Her own energy plummeted, leaving her weak and breathless, but a surge of hope, fragile yet potent, bloomed in her chest. For the first time, her hidden power felt like a path to salvation, not just a curse. She felt it, clear as day. This was her purpose. This sudden connection to the blight made the stakes infinitely higher, making her more than just a mate. It made her the key. The pack's head healer, an ancient, wizened she-wolf named Maeve, meticulously examined the afflicted Omega. The faint receding of the rash was undeniable, a scientific fact that defied all their traditional remedies. The news of Elara's strange, glowing touch spread like wildfire through the Shadow Moon pack, whispers of Omega and Luna carrying on the wind. Her immediate goal was to find answers, to understand the depths of her lineage and its connection to this terrifying plague. She spent hours poring over dusty scrolls in the pack's hidden archives, a place Maeve, with a curious glint in her eyes, had surprisingly granted her access to. Meanwhile, the reports from neighboring territories grew grimmer. More packs were afflicted, their numbers dwindling, the mystery deepening. This rising tide of sickness pressed down on everyone, heavy and relentless, reminding them of the encroaching danger. Kyle, burdened by the weight of his pack's survival, observed Elara constantly, his strategic mind already calculating the implications of her unique ability. He had initially dismissed the old prophecies as mere folklore, but the sight of her glowing hands, the faint reversal of the blight, made him reconsider everything. He needed her. The pack needed her. As the silence stretched in the quiet hours of the night, Maeve sought Elara out in the library, her expression somber. "The whispers," Maeve began, her voice raspy with age. "They speak of a dormant Omega, a Lycan Luna, one who can bind the fractured bloodlines and repel a great darkness." Her words were a chilling echo of Elara's own fragmented memories, ancient tales from a time before her family went into hiding. The weight of generations settled upon Elara's shoulders. But the prophecy also speaks of a price, Maeve continued, her gaze piercing, and of those who seek to use such power for their own ends. Just then, a shadow flickered past the library window, too swift to identify, but leaving behind the acrid scent of bitter herbs and subtle malice. It was a faint scent, one she recognized from her rogue days, a rival pack's signature. The rival Alpha, then, was closer than they thought, perhaps even watching. This chilling revelation not only confirmed the external threat, but suggested a connection between the plague, Elara's burgeoning power, and a sinister, unseen hand. The map lay spread across the Alpha's table, a sprawling parchment dotted with ancient markings and Maeve's hastily drawn symbols of the spreading blight. Elara's fingers traced a path through the darkened areas, a cold dread coiling in her gut. Her immediate goal was clear: find the source of the plague. Because Maeve's prophecies and her own surging magic confirmed it. This wasn't natural. "The blight is strongest here," Elara announced, her voice steadier than she felt, pointing to a cluster of shadowed valleys deep within the rival territory. "And the energy. It feels like it's being fed." Kyle leaned over the map, his brow furrowed, while Finn and Rhys flanked him, their expressions grim. The tension was palpable, a live wire humming in the room. Rhys, ever the untamed warrior, growled low. "A direct assault. We hit them hard." But then, Cale shook his head. "Too risky. We're already weakened by the plague." His gaze, usually so unwavering, held a flicker of doubt, a momentary crack in his stoic facade. This was the burden of leadership, the constant tightrope walk between protection and aggression. Elara watched them, a profound realization settling over her. They were more than just mates, they were leaders carrying the weight of their pack on their shoulders. She felt it, clear as day, the invisible threads of responsibility binding them. And now, binding her too. Instead, Elara spoke, her voice cutting through the tension with an unexpected authority. "Not an assault, an infiltration. We need samples from the source, the heart of their territory." Her idea was audacious, reckless even, but necessary. Maeve's words about her Lycan Luna magic, about its potential to bind and repel, echoed in her mind. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about protecting their pack. A pack that, against all her lifelong resistance, was slowly becoming hers. Rhys's golden eyes widened, a flicker of admiration in their depths. Cale, after a long, assessing look, gave a terse nod. "Dangerous," he agreed, "but necessary. We go, the four of us." And just like that, the decision was made. Elara, the lone wolf, was now deliberately stepping into the heart of danger, not for herself, but for them. The forest within the rival territory felt different, heavier. The air grew thick with the sickly sweet scent of the blight, mingling with the acrid stench of their enemies. Elara moved between Cale, Rhys, and Finn, their combined presence a shield around her, their movements a synchronized dance honed by instinct and years of living on the edge. Her immediate goal was to reach the blight's epicenter, a gnarled, ancient tree pulsating with dark energy. The subtle pull of her Omega magic thrummed, guiding her like an internal compass. She felt a growing confidence in her power, a stark contrast to her earlier fear. They were close. So close. But then, a flash of movement, a rustle in the underbrush that was too deliberate, too knowing. "Ambush!" Rhys roared, his instincts screaming, even as a flurry of dark figures erupted from the shadows, their eyes burning with cold malice. These weren't just scouts. These were hardened warriors from the rival pack, moving with a chilling precision. They knew. They had been waiting. It was a direct, calculated attack. Because of that ambush, the stakes instantly escalated from infiltration to desperate survival. What followed was a brutal, chaotic dance. Cale was a whirlwind of controlled power, his every move strategic and devastating. Finn, surprisingly agile, darted through the fray, distracting and disarming with fluid grace. Rhys, however, fought with a primal, untamed fury tearing through opponents. But there were too many. One rival wolf, larger and faster than the rest, broke through Kale's guard, lunging directly for Elara. Before she could move, Rhys, with a savage snarl, threw himself in front of her, taking the blow meant for her. His howl of pain ripped through the night, a sound that tore at Elara's very soul. "Rhys!" Her world tilted. Without thinking, a raw, protective scream tore from her throat, and her Lycan Luna magic erupted, unbidden, uncontrolled. A blinding wave of pure energy surged from her, slamming into their attackers. They reeled back, scorched and disoriented, their snarls turning to whimpers. Her power, untamed and terrifying, had saved him, but it had also revealed her fully. The return to the Shadow Moon packhouse was a grim one. Rhys, though recovering, bore a deep, ragged gash on his flank. Finn tended to his own minor injuries, his charming smile replaced by a worried frown. Kyle, his face grim, led Elara directly to his private study, the air thick with unspoken questions. Her power, her lineage. The secret was out. There was no going back now. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the silence of the room. Her immediate goal was simply to confess, to lay bare the truth she'd hidden for so long, and pray for understanding, for acceptance. Kyle turned, his gaze piercing, demanding answers. That power, Elara, it was beyond anything we've ever seen. What are you? His voice, usually so steady, held a tremor of awe and trepidation. She felt it, clear as day, the raw vulnerability in his query. Finn, leaning against the doorframe, his eyes narrowed, added, "And why did you hide it? Why hide who you are?" The questions were blades, cutting through her carefully constructed defenses. It was terrifying, this absolute exposure, but also, strangely, liberating. She thought of her lost family, the hushed warnings of ancient hunters, the constant fear that had shaped her entire life. It was a long, painful story to tell. Deep down, she knew the truth. She had to trust them. Now. As if fate demanded it, Elara took a shaky breath. "I am Elara Sinclair," she began, her voice trembling but gaining strength. "A lost omega of a forgotten Lycan Luna lineage. My magic. It's ancient, tied to the earth, to life itself, but it's also a target. My family went into hiding because of it, scattered by those who hunted us for power." Her words hung in the air, heavy with centuries of fear and sacrifice. Kyle and Finn listened, their expressions shifting from shock to dawning comprehension. The moment their eyes locked with hers, something inside them shifted. Their alpha instincts recognized something profound, something powerful in her confession. The space between them burned, not with tension, but with a fierce, growing connection. This was the truth, laid bare, and with it came the undeniable weight of her destiny, a destiny now irrevocably intertwined with theirs. They would face it together. A guttural cough racked Maeve's frail frame, her ancient eyes clouded with despair. The pack healer, usually a beacon of calm, now trembled, her face ashen. The stench of the blight, once confined to the outskirts, now permeated the very air of the Shadow Moon packhouse, thick and cloying like sickly sweet death. More wolves, young and old, lay weak in the communal healing den, their bodies racked by tremors, black lesions spreading like ink across their fur. Elara moved among them, her heart aching with each shallow breath she heard, each pained whimper. Her immediate goal was to heal them, to stop the insidious advance, but her Lycan Luna magic, usually a steady flow, felt muted, stretched thin against the overwhelming tide of sickness. A cold dread, heavier than any winter snow, settled in her chest. This was worse than anything Maeve's prophecies had foretold. But then, a triumphant, mocking roar ripped through the forest, shaking the very foundations of the packhouse. It wasn't a warning. It was a declaration of war. The rival alpha, Silas, emerged from the tree line, his massive form silhouetted against the grim, twilight sky. Behind him, his pack, seemingly untouched by the blight, surged forward like a dark, hungry wave. Silas's gaze, chillingly direct, found Elara, a sneer twisting his lips. The Luna's power exposed at last, his voice boomed, carried on the wind. And now it shall be mine. He gestured, and from the depths of his ranks, figures began dragging Shadow Moon scouts, captured, beaten, and, horrifyingly, infected with the blight. Silas had used the plague as a weapon, a cruel Trojan horse to weaken them from within, because he knew their strength lay in their numbers. This wasn't just a battle for territory. It was a ruthless strategy to dismantle them, piece by agonizing piece. What followed was a brutal, one-sided assault. The Shadow Moon warriors, already weakened by the unseen enemy gnawing at their insides, fought valiantly, but they faltered. Their movements were sluggish, their growls lacked their usual power. Kale, Rhys, and Finn roared commands, fighting with the ferocity of cornered beasts, but even they struggled against the sheer, uninfected numbers of Silas's pack. Elara, watching the devastation, felt a surge of cold terror. Her power, usually so responsive, felt distant, like a flickering candle in a hurricane. She was losing them. All of them. And the sickening thought that her very presence, her exposure, had brought this ultimate destruction, began to poison her soul. This was the crushing weight of utter failure. The cacophony of battle raged outside, each snarl and pained yelp echoing Elara's growing desperation. Inside the healing den, a few remaining healers worked frantically, their faces streaked with grime and tears. Finn, his usual charming facade utterly gone, lay feverish, his breath shallow, the black lesions crawling up his neck. Rhys, despite his own injuries from the ambush, knelt beside him, his wild eyes brimming with a raw, desperate fear Elara had never seen in him. Kale was still out there, fighting a losing battle. Her immediate goal was to heal Finn, to prove her magic was enough, because if it wasn't, what good was she? She placed her hands on Finn's chest, her fingers trembling, and channeled every ounce of her Lycan Luna magic. A wave of light, fainter than before, pulsed from her palms, but it sputtered. The black lesions receded by a fraction, only to blossom anew, bolder and darker than before. A strangled cry escaped her lips. It wasn't working. Not fully. The ancient power, which had felt so potent just days ago, now felt like a broken well. Exhaustion, bone deep and heavy, slammed into her. She pulled her hands away, defeated. Rhys looked at her, his golden eyes filled with a heartbreak that mirrored her own. "Elara?" he whispered, his voice hoarse, the question a fresh wound. Meanwhile, a terrified whimper from a nearby pup, suffering acutely from the blight, cut through the noise. Elara stumbled towards it, trying again, but the energy was gone. Nothing. Just cold, empty hands. She was useless. The whispers she'd overheard earlier, the doubts about her power, now roared in her mind. Lost Omega. Worthless. A burden. Her childhood trauma, the haunting feeling of being abandoned and powerless, surged to the forefront. She felt small, insignificant, and utterly, tragically, alone. Rhys, seeing her despair, reached for her hand, but Elara recoiled, pulling away. She didn't deserve his touch, his hope. She was a failure. The very thought that she, the prophesied Luna, was failing when her pack needed her most, ripped through her with agonizing force. The pack house shook violently, a section of the grand hall collapsing with a thunderous roar. Silas's triumphant howl, closer now, echoed through the crumbling structure. He had broken through. He was inside. Elara, slumped against a cold stone wall in the healing den, could hear the sounds of splintering wood and desperate snarls from just outside. Her body ached, her mind a numb void of despair. The pervasive scent of the blight, mingled with the metallic tang of blood, choked her. Her goal, once so clear, now felt like a cruel joke. There was no escaping this, no saving them. A beat later, Kyle stumbled into the den, supporting a gravely injured warrior. His face was streaked with blood and sweat, his usually composed features twisted into a mask of pure desperation. His eyes, normally unflappable, met Elara's, and in them, she saw it, a flicker of raw, undisguised defeat. He didn't have to say a word. The truth was written plainly in his gaze. They had lost everything. Rhys, cradling the feverish Finn, whimpered a low, mournful sound, a sound of utter despair. Even his wild heart had shattered. She didn't know what scared her more, the roar of Silas's victory or the quiet, terrifying silence that had settled in her own soul. Her deepest misbelief, that connection only brought destruction and that she was better off alone, felt brutally confirmed. Her lineage, her magic, it was all a curse, not a gift. She had fought to stay free, to avoid this very fate, and now, by trying to embrace it, she had led them all to ruin. She was the reason for this devastation, because her weakness, her inadequacy, had failed them. Elara closed her eyes, the bitter taste of ash on her tongue, and simply existed in the overwhelming darkness. There was nothing left, no hope, no fight, just the crushing weight of absolute loss. A low moan from Finn, barely a whisper from the depths of his fever, pierced through the thick despair clinging to Elara. His struggle, Rhys's raw grief, and Cale's unyielding battle cries echoing from the ruined hall, refused to let her succumb. She couldn't give up. Not now. A faint, almost imperceptible warmth sparked deep within her, a tiny ember against the biting cold of her despair. It wasn't her own power, not yet, but something else. It felt ancient, like the whispers of forgotten ancestors stirring in the very stones of the pack house. Her eyes, heavy with unshed tears, squeezed shut. She had to find a way. Suddenly, a vision, shimmering and translucent like heat haze over dry earth, unfolded before her closed eyes. She saw a vast moonlit plain, and on it, a powerful female wolf, larger than any she'd ever imagined. This was a Lycan Luna, regal and strong. But she wasn't alone. 3 male wolves, each distinct yet undeniably bound, stood around her, their forms blurring and intertwining with hers. The Luna's howl resonated, not with pain, but with immense power, and the 3 alphas howled with her, their voices merging into a single, breathtaking symphony that healed the land around them. The Luna's eyes, golden and wise, met Elara's across the ethereal divide. Strength is not solitary. The ancient voice resonated in Elara's mind, clear as a mountain spring. It is woven. It is shared. Your bond is your power. A gasp tore from Elara's throat as her eyes snapped open. The vision faded, but its truth remained. A blazing fire in her soul. She hadn't been weak. She had been trying to fight alone, ignoring the very source of her power. Her Lycan Luna magic wasn't meant to be wielded in isolation. It was meant to intertwine with her triplet mates. That's why she had failed. Her fear of dependence, her deep-rooted misbelief, had blinded her to the boundless strength waiting to be unleashed. A fierce, unshakable determination solidified within her. No longer paralyzed by despair, she felt a powerful surge of renewed hope. Now, she would fight not just for them, but with them, as one. She scrambled to her feet, her gaze locking onto Rhys, her hand instinctively reaching for his. Rhys, his face streaked with dirt and despair, flinched when Elara's hand touched his arm, a spark of surprise in his golden eyes. He looked at her, his expression mirroring the utter defeat she'd just shed. "Elara, there's no hope," he rasped, his voice raw. She squeezed his arm, her gaze unwavering, radiating a newfound inner fire. "There is," she insisted, her voice clear and strong despite the chaos around them. "There always is." She pulled him to his feet, her gaze sweeping over Finn's fevered form and then to the doorway where Cale was still fighting. Her immediate goal was to make them understand, to make them believe in the power of their bond. because it was their only chance. In short, Elara explained, her words precise and urgent, the vision of the ancient Luna and the intertwined alphas. She spoke of her lineage, not as a burden, but as a key that needed their combined alpha strength to unlock its full potential. My magic, she clarified, it's not just mine. It's meant to merge with yours, all three of you, to anchor it, to make it unstoppable. Rhys stared, his eyes widening with dawning comprehension. The raw grief in his expression slowly transformed into something else, awe, then fierce resolve. A beat later, Kyle, drawn by Elara's sudden surge of energy, stumbled back into the den, grimly wounded, but still defiant. He stopped, his gaze falling on Elara, sensing the profound shift in her. Elara met Kale's gaze, her voice ringing with newfound authority. We are not 3 alphas and an omega Luna, she declared, her stance firm, a parallel structure emphasizing the profound shift. We are 4 halves of a whole meant to bind together. She extended her hands, one to Kale, one to Rhys. Your strength, your instincts, your minds, they are my anchors, and my magic will be your shield, your conduit, your healing. Kale, seeing the truth reflected in her eyes, nodded, a silent acknowledgement of her unprecedented power. Without another word, he took her hand, his strong fingers intertwining with hers. Rhys, with a fierce snarl of renewed determination, grasped her other hand. Together, the 3 of them looked down at Finn, a shared purpose solidifying their bond, and a silent promise passing between them. They would save him, and their pack, or die trying. A roar, unified and deafening, ripped from Kale, Rhys, and Elara, shaking the very foundations of the pack house. It was a sound unlike any heard before, a perfect blend of alpha dominance and Lycan Luna power, infused with a raw, desperate hope. Their combined energy surged, a golden aura shimmering around them. Elara felt it, clear as day, the immense power flowing through her, anchored by her mates. Her immediate goal was to push back, to create an opening, to reach Silas, because his defeat was the only way to save their pack. Their combined will was a tangible force, pushing back against the encroaching darkness. They moved as one. Kale, leading with strategic precision, became a blur of controlled power, clearing a path through Silas's confused warriors. Rhys, a wild, untamed whirlwind, unleashed primal fury, his every movement a deadly dance. And Elara, between them, her hands glowing with ancient light, projected waves of purified energy pushing back the blight, weakening Silas's infected forces, and even offering momentary relief to her own fallen pack members. The rival pack, accustomed to fighting weakened opponents, stumbled, disoriented by this sudden, overwhelming surge of power. They hadn't anticipated the true strength of a complete unified bond. Silas, standing amidst his forces, his face contorted in a sneer, finally spotted them. His eyes, burning with malice, widened in shock and disbelief as he watched the 3 alphas and their glowing Luna move as one unstoppable force. Impossible, he roared, his voice laced with venom. He launched himself forward, a dark, snarling blur, directly towards Elara, intending to sever the bond at its source. But before he could even reach them, Kale, Rhys, and Elara seamlessly shifted formation, their instincts perfectly aligned. They were ready. The air thickened with anticipation, a silent promise of the decisive confrontation to come. Silas, fueled by his desperate ambition and underestimating their bond, had just walked into the maw of his own demise. A guttural snarl ripped from Silas's throat as he launched himself forward, a dark blur of raw, unhinged power. He aimed straight for Elara, his eyes blazing with a desperate, malicious intent to sever the very bond he now understood to be their greatest strength. But he was too slow. Because for the first time, Elara, Kale, and Rhys moved as one, a seamless, unstoppable force. Her Lycan Luna magic surged, a blinding wave of pure, white-hot energy that met Silas's dark, plague-ridden essence head-on. The impact was deafening, a collision of light and shadow that sent shockwaves through the air, shaking the very foundations of the crumbling packhouse. Kyle, strategic and unyielding, anticipated Silas's every move. He became a whirlwind of controlled power, his fangs snapping just inches from Silas's throat, forcing the rival Alpha to divert. Meanwhile, Rhys, a blur of primal fury, used his raw strength to slam Silas against a crumbling stone pillar, cracking the ancient masonry. Elara, anchored by her mates, focused her energy. She felt the ancient Luna power welling within her, the healing and destructive forces perfectly balanced. She wasn't just deflecting Silas's attacks. She was actively siphoning the Blight's power from him, weakening him with every pulse of her magic. His eyes widened, a flicker of fear replacing his rage as he realized his own weapon was being used against him. The climax was swift and brutal. Silas, weakened and disoriented, roared in frustration, a desperate final surge of his dying power. But it was no match for the unified might arrayed against him. Kyle delivered a crushing blow to his side, followed by a savage bite from Rhys that locked onto his leg. Then Elara, with a guttural growl that echoed the deepest parts of her wolf, plunged her glowing hands into Silas's chest, not to destroy, but to cleanse. A blinding flash of light erupted, pure and incandescent, as the blight ripped itself from Silas's core, leaving him a hollow, defeated shell. He crumpled, inert, as the last vestiges of the plague vanished, sucked into the earth. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the ragged breathing of the triumphant Shadow Moon Alphas. The heavy silence after Silas's defeat was almost as overwhelming as the battle's roar. A collective gasp rippled through the remaining Shadow Moon pack members who had witnessed the impossible victory. Elara, breathless and trembling, still felt the immense power vibrating through her. Kale and Rhys, battered but triumphant, stood beside her, their hands instinctively finding hers, a shared exhaustion and profound relief washing over them. Their alpha scents, usually dominant, were now softened by the scent of victory and a burgeoning peace. Her immediate goal was to ensure her pack's healing and to comprehend the magnitude of what they had just achieved. She felt it, clear as day, the profound shift in the air, the lifting of the dark pall that had threatened to consume them. Soon after, Maeve, the old healer, hobbled forward, her eyes brimming with tears of joy and reverence. She touched Elara's hand, her ancient gaze filled with knowing. "The Lycan Luna," she whispered, her voice cracking with emotion. The prophecy. Fulfilled. Pack members, once filled with despair, now stumbled from their hiding places, their faces pale, but their eyes shining with a renewed hope. The scent of the blight was gone, replaced by the crisp, clean scent of damp earth and the lingering warmth of Elara's magic. Finn, still weak but conscious, was carefully brought out, his smile, though frail, shining brighter than ever. Rhys immediately knelt beside him, a fierce tenderness in his golden eyes, nuzzling his brother. In the quiet that followed, Elara looked at Kale, then Rhys, then Finn. Their bond, tested by fire and shadow, now pulsed with an undeniable strength, a shared triumph forged in chaos. She was no longer just a mate. She was an anchor, a source of unity, and they were her unwavering foundation. A new sense of purpose, clearer than any mountain stream, settled over her. This wasn't just a victory for the Shadow Moon Pack. It was a victory for all shifter kind, a testament to what could be achieved when disparate powers united. The long night was finally over, and the promise of a new dawn, bright and hopeful, stretched before them. Months later, the Shadow Moon territory thrived, more vibrant and united than ever before. The packhouse, rebuilt and fortified, stood as a testament to their resilience. The scent of thriving life, of healthy wolves and lush forests, filled the air, a stark contrast to the blight's stench. Elara, now confidently walking as the Lycan Luna, moved among her pack, her steps light, her heart full. She was no longer hiding. She was leading, her wisdom and ancient magic guiding them. Her initial fear of dependence had vanished. replaced by a deep understanding that her greatest strength came from the unbreakable bond she shared with her mates. The Grand Plaza, usually reserved for seasonal celebrations, now pulsed with delegates from every major shifter pack drawn by the incredible tale of the Triplet Alphas and their unique Luna. Kale, Reese, and Finn stood beside Elara, their individual strengths complementing each other perfectly. Kale's calm authority, Reese's fierce loyalty, and Finn's diplomatic grace combined to form an unstoppable leadership. Their bond, once a source of confusion and jealousy, was now openly celebrated, a symbol of unity and a new era for all shifter kind. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Elara looked at her mates. Reese's hand found hers, his fingers intertwining, a silent promise in his touch. Kale's arm settled around her waist, grounding her with his steady presence, and Finn, with a mischievous glint in his eye, leaned in to whisper a playful remark, making her laugh. Their journey had culminated in a deeply satisfying fantasy fairy tale, where their unique bond wasn't just accepted but revered. It was a testament to their burning, intense fire and the boundless power of love that truly transcended all expectations. They were a family, a pack, a legend. And as the moon rose high above, bathing the united shifters in its soft glow, Elara knew, with absolute certainty, that their Alpha Series legacy had just begun. Their future, interwoven and bright, stretched before them like an endless, shimmering horizon,